right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Way of the Truth Warrior. I'm your host, David Whitehead, and I am so happy about today's show. This is going to be absolutely epic. I've got three legends in the house, patriots, freedom fighters, gentlemen who have given so much for this country, all the work that they have done, and everything that they've done with this incredible movement in Canada to restore freedom and sanity to this great country again. They were very much involved with the great Canadian trucker convoy that went off and inspired this country, inspired me, and ended up inspiring the entire world. They're sporting Canadian flags in the Netherlands. They're sporting Canadian flags in Brazil. They're sporting them in the US. We've really lit a fire, and I'm so happy to have them here. We've got the great Tom Quiggin with us. We've got Jack Spinney, and we've got Saxxon Murray. And gentlemen, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for all you've done and all you're doing. And thank you so much for being here. Let's start with Tom. If each one of you guys could just give us the quick little background, elevator pitch, introduction for those who aren't aware of you. Tom, over to you, sir.
Tom Quiggin, ex-military. I spent a few years cruising around the North Atlantic and the Caribbean doing anti-submarine warfare and open ocean search and rescue. I then spent 10 years as an intelligence officer in all the exciting places like Bosnia, Croatia, Albania, Serbia, Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, those kinds of, exciting travel places. I worked for the Privy Council office doing intelligence assessments for cabinet and prime minister. Worked for the RCMP for 6 years doing national security investigation work as an intelligence contractor. Wrote a few books on national security stuff. My role with the convoy became sort of the de facto intelligence officer, and my primary role was protective intelligence, i.e., intelligence based on the idea of protecting the convoy, protecting the first responders who worked around the convoy, and then the citizenry of Ottawa itself. And it was one of those accidental things. I never planned on being an intelligence officer for a convoy, but there I was.
Well, fantastic. Your resume is just like a mile long. You've done so much. We're going to talk a bit also about the book that came out in June about the convoy. But Saxxon, over to you, sir.
Yeah, Saxxon Murray. So 12-year combat engineer, veteran. I've been out for a little bit. I have another job that I guess I won't put out there into the public, but I still work and to a degree. And also was involved in the convoy in Ottawa. And my job basically was doing crowd surveillance and close protection for some of the speakers that we had coming, as well as general like patrolling through and seeing what's going on. If there was any incidences, kind of go look into it, investigate it a little bit, and then report that up our chain of volunteers that we had doing security. And then I also kind of liaison between other groups that were doing security as well that existed within the convoy whenever possible. So that was kind of my role during the convoy. So I'm going to be commenting on things like that.
Excellent, man. Thank you so much for being here. It's incredible. Jake, over to you, sir. I've seen so many of your videos. I'm so happy you're here. Go ahead.
It's a lot shorter than the boys. Just did a couple of years in the Royal Canadian Dragoons. Did lots of things after that. Currently, I'm a homesteader now. Ended up at the convoy and kind of ended up as the de facto guard commander, I guess, as it were, after we took the fence down around the War Memorial. So I guess and I lived on Wellington Street for 2.5, 3 weeks. So that's where you'll be hearing my pain from.
And if I'm not mistaken, you got the name, or I can't remember which one of you guys got it, the Ghost of Wellington. Is that you,
that's
Jake?
me.
All
yeah,
right.
that was me.
And it was kind of a funny timing because of all the stuff going on with Ukraine and the way the media was covering it with the Ghost of Kiev, and we have our own.
The video game, you mean? The video game coverage?
Exactly. Well, gentlemen, we've got an inquiry going on right now. It's been incredible to watch how many contradictions and lies that the media and the government narrative told Canadians have already been debunked by a lot of the testimony we've gotten, a lot of the evidence that's come through. I wish that more Canadians were actually watching this inquiry. And so I've been doing my best on this show to talk about it, to on my social media, post these little clips that are going around so people can just see an example of a Banana Republic kind of situation here, where we have our government that look what they have done to our charter, to our country. And they still have the gall to walk around as if they didn't do anything wrong. Everything was cool. But we've got some decent lawyers. You guys have a good team on the ground, and a lot of good information is coming out. So I know we've got a few clips and things we want to get into. But Tom, where should we begin?
Well, I don't, hard to say. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, I guess the primary point we're looking at today, I guess, is to say that Marco Mendicino, the public safety minister, who holds the file basically for everybody, RCMP, CSIS, Corrections Canada, all the enforcement agents, he's the boss. He's the top guy. He's, you know, the big dog. We can go into a multiplicity of lies that have come out of this guy, but the most disturbing thing came out yesterday. He said he knew that at Coventry Road, where the Convoy had its logistics base, that there were, you know, ex-police and ex-military specialists, and they had all this training, and they were there, and they were going to use their super advanced skills, and their plan was to use, you know, these special operations and ideas to overthrow government. He, of course, said this with no evidence. He didn't name any names. It would be fun to hear him say, well, that was, you know, Tom Quiggin was there or Saxxon was there or something. But, of course, none of us were actually there because we were downtown. But, yeah, it's fascinating to see this guy literally lie through his teeth about very serious issues on the public record while under oath. And people say, oh, this is so shocking. And I'm kind of, well, I'm not shocked. When this convoy started, I realized, like, before the convoy got here, that we were going to be the target of an information operation by the government of Canada. So I don't know if you remember, before the convoy got here, there was this newspaper headline: Justin Trudeau was whisked out of town to a secret location for his protection. And it was like, whoa, there's this big, super scary threat coming, and it's so bad that we have to hide the prime minister. So what? You know, it was just
it the bouncy castles.
But I realized, what's that?
I just said, was it the bouncy castles? Maybe too many bouncy castles.
Yeah, bouncy castles. I don't know. Maybe he's allergic to hot tubs and the chlorine in a hot tub. I don't know. But anyway, I mean, that was a thing. But during the entire process, I've come to view, and it's my own personal opinion, that the most continuous and most prolific liar in the government on this hasn't been necessarily Prime Minister Trudeau himself, but rather Marco Mendicino. He has lied consistently right from the start. He is informed of what actually happened. He's informed of the truth. And then he turns around and tells the exact same lie again, under oath, in Parliament, on the public record. So I'm just going to, my little part of this conversation, I think, before we turn it over to the guys who are kind of more frontline than I was, is to say, look, I wrote this book called Eyewitness to Deceit. It's about Prime Minister Trudeau's info war on the convoy. It came out in June, long before the commission started. And I was going to say, look, in the book, I refer to 6 specific, documented, verifiable cases where Mendicino lied to the public on record. So in a parliamentary committee in April, he referred to the arson attack that occurred in Ottawa. And he's saying, you know, people live in apartment buildings, found their doors locked, and fires were being set, and the convoy was burning down these buildings. Now, fortunately, another MP jumped in and said, whoa, Mr. Mendicino, hang on. We know that the Ottawa police investigated that, arrested 2 guys who had nothing to do with the convoy whatsoever, other than geographic proximity. That was it. And so, anyway, I mean, Mendicino knows that. He is the chief law enforcement officer for the whole country, and he lies about it anyway. And then he turns around and lies about it again later anyway. So, you know, one example. The second one is, you know, Mendicino is up there, you know, police found loaded shotguns in the truck. And he actually says, it's a miracle. It's nothing short of miraculous that nobody was seriously injured. Now, of course, as we later know, there were 0 guns found in Ottawa, except for 1 that was found in the person of an anti-convoy protester. 0 guns in the trucks, 0 violence, etc. Mendicino knows that. He's got access to every law enforcement agency in the country, but he continues to use that lie. He also talked about, you know, rape threats. Women in Ottawa were threatened with rape. They couldn't go out at night. This is terrible. Now, I go into this in the book at some length, but that was a social media thing put forth by one person. Everybody repeated it. There was nothing to it. But yet, you know, Mendicino says on the public record, there were Ottawans who were subject to intimidation, harassment, and threats of rape. Again, zero evidence, nothing to support that other than one social media post by somebody. And in the book, I sort of show, the whole thing was a fake anyway. It is interesting to note that MP Rachel Doncho actually asked, she said, well, Mr. Mendocino, if this thing is so serious and there was guns and rape and all of this stuff, why were members of cabinet, judges, MPs, and the citizens allowed to just walk up and down the street with no extra protection? And you might remember Rupa, the reporter who was from the National Post, but is now over at True North. And she goes, look, I'm a woman of color. I'm a brown person. I wandered around through the whole convoy and didn't run into a single problem. So again, Mendocino knows the whole rape story is a lie, but he does it anyway. Mendocino also just brought up again yesterday the whole issue of it was a national crisis. We had to have the Emergency Act because the borders were closed. We were losing billions of dollars worth of trade. And of course, when they imposed the Emergency Act, the borders were already opened. The blockades were gone. So that's just a false statement. The other thing is StatsCan and everybody else came out and said, yeah, no, there wasn't really any disruption in trade. In fact, trade in February actually went up a bit. So all that happened is the blockades caused an upset for one day. The truckers go to the next port of entry and away they go. So he's willfully lying again, using international trade and border security as an issue when in fact it's already been publicly shown on the record multiple times that it's complete crap. Now, the last one was, and this is to me the most famous one, he is on the record at least 6 times, this many, that the only reason they put the Emergency Act in was because the police requested it. And of course, throughout the summer, we've seen a stream of police officials going, not us. RCMP says not them. OPP, nope, not them. Ottawa Police, they didn't really have a chief while this was all happening, or they had 3 chiefs, depending on your point of view. But they have all said that wasn't us. We didn't request it. The mayor of Gatineau says she talked to her police chief, and nope, wasn't them. And of course, none of the other police chiefs could request it. Toronto, Windsor, Hamilton, whatever. So his saying that 6 times on the public record with the cameras running is a direct, absolute lie. So anyway, that's kind of my opening position on the whole thing. Mendocino has lied repeatedly as part of a larger government policy of InfoWar against the convoy. So anything he says now, I'd reject it out of hand.
Yeah, guys, you don't just trust these liars when they're proven to lie. Well summarized. I'll just play the Coventry clip and then we'll jump right away to Saxxon and then over to Jake. Okay, so here's that one that I've got. Let's see what this liar is saying on the stand.
Policies by the government. But then there was another group that had other more extreme objectives that was much more sophisticated and organized. And it's my recollection that that latter group was interspersed in a number of different locations very tactically, but that there was a concentration of that latter group at Coventry Road that was made up potentially of individuals who had previously served in either the military or in law enforcement. And that to me raised a concern, a very serious concern, about some of the counter operations that could be run by that group to overwhelm legitimate law enforcement. And that, I think, is exactly what Chief Slowly is getting at.
It's incredible. Saxxon, over to you, brother.
Yeah, so that's a very frustrating testimony to hear because as Tom was mentioning, Mendocino likes to lie. And right there, as a veteran who was involved specifically with other veterans and other ex-police doing security aspects, I was pretty familiar with the different crowds and groups that made up the convoy just from doing my work of watching and kind of patrolling the streets, especially in the evening and stuff like that, when there would be more of a need for security because even the police presence would go down on most nights during the weekday. So there was no organized anything anywhere to begin with. So that's the first thing. And we already know throughout the evidence that's been presented at the inquiry that there was no violent organizations that they actually had concerns about or anything like that. Like we've already gotten through that point. But Marco Mendocino is up on the stand claiming that he had concerns because there were military and ex-police organized and they could overwhelm the police using their tactics, and specifically at Coventry. And I wasn't at Coventry very much, but a lot of the people I talked to were. And the most that you would get from veterans' presence there was, on occasion, sometimes they would go assist with watching the trucks in the evening, kind of rotating in with the truckers themselves so they could get some extra sleep and things like that. So that would be the most that you would see from any veterans. And as for somebody who was working with other police, doing close protection for people like Dr. Hodgkins and Maxime Bernier and things like that, taking them around when it was very busy on the weekends, because they had threats against them that we were intercepting from social media and things like that from Antifa people or very annoyed Ottawa citizens. So we would get those threats, and we understood that we had to have close protection for them. But we, at no point in time did I ever meet another veteran or police officer that wanted to do anything other than support the peaceful protest, help keep it peaceful. And that was about it. And for being organized in any fashion, no organization for veterans, I can say anyways, happened till after the whole entire convoy. So there was not even an organized veteran presence to begin with, besides loosely organized groups that existed. And I think Jake will be able to speak a little bit more on that. But overall, he claims that there was groups at Coventry. There were not. There was no organized groups anywhere. He does not offer any evidence, and there is no evidence to suggest that what he is saying is true. But he's up on the stand. He's not questioned. No one rebuttals him on any of the statements he makes, and he makes unsubstantiated claims. He just gets to do that freely, and he just lied right through his teeth about things that didn't happen to make up concerns to buffer his reasoning to why he supported enacting the Emergency Measures Act, which is a total fabrication. But he's still doing it anyways because the media can run away with what he's saying up on the stand, make some narratives out of it, and now we're going to see that ex-military and ex-police were actually there with plans to overwhelm the police down there, which was never the case, because we were more interested in working alongside the police to keep things on an even keel, to be down there non-biased. For instance, Marco Mendocino mentions in his testimony yesterday that there was police being overwhelmed by civilian protesters, like they were being swarmed, he said. There was never any swarming, but what you would see is people gather around to see what the police are doing. So there was an incident where the police came and started causing a problem with one of the truckers that was parked on the road. And the police caused a little bit of a scene. They came in a large number, probably about 7 to 8 police officers. They showed up and they started to argue with some of the crowd, and the crowd kind of encircled them and told them to go away. And so they ended up forming a line. Pat King was there, and they sang "Oh Canada," and the cops took off and they all cheered or whatever. And so that would have been an example of a swarming of police. So this is the type of language that he's using and exaggerating. And now he's totally exaggerating the existence of veterans and ex-police being down there. And so it's very frustrating to see, because he's trying to act like we were going to use our previous training for violent means. Meanwhile, he's actually engaging in trying to use active service members for violent means. So it's pretty frustrating to watch that happen, and the narrative be spun up that now veterans and ex-police should be considered threats to civil society, which I think is the underlying tone that people are going to walk away with. So I don't like that.
That's why we're doing this, gents, because this way we can clear up the record from people who were there. And I can confirm, just from I was covering every nanosecond of this thing, and I had lots of friends down there in Ottawa. Of course, I've had Danny Bulford on the show many times to also talk about it. He was doing the same thing, going and trying to provide security, and his whole message through the whole thing, like, you can't find a single video of him and so many others who were literally saying, guys, let's keep it peaceful. Let's keep it friendly. Even Tamara Leash, like, keep it peaceful. This is about love. It's about coming together. We're not trying to start anything. Let's support the police. Let's work with the police. Even guys like, Transplendor, I always forget his name. He was down there every day. So many other guys checking and going, yep, high-fiving the cops, hanging out, like, it was totally a different vibe when you would watch the footage from the ground versus if you turn into like CBC News or something like that, right? So that's to be expected, of course. But Jake, take it away, sir.
Yeah, so couldn't agree with Saxxon anymore. I guess the only point I'll make is the only thing, well, it's not the only point I'll make, the first point I'll make. The only thing close to any sort of like organization was the guard duty we put on the tomb and the National War Memorial after we took that despicable fence down, right? And so I kept the guard schedule of 2 guys doing 2-hour shifts. That's about as organized as we got, right? As far as the rest of it goes, like I said, Zach nailed it. Like Machino, or however you say his name, in the Parliament the day after we took the fence down. This isn't a direct quote by any means, but said of protesters appearing to be veterans attacked the war memorial when we took the fence down. Like, those were his words, that we attacked the war memorial. And the reason that we appeared to look like veterans is because we were, right? That's why everybody was wearing berets and had medals on. Actually, Brian Maher gave a little speech before we did that and asked anybody who wasn't a veteran to please step back. And, any veterans that was not anything to do with it, any veterans that weren't comfortable with, like no harm, no foul, whatever, but we were doing this, right? So, I mean, there's just hours and hours and hours and hours of video that disprove everything Marco says. And I like what Tom said too about the stats. They are really, really, really harping on the economic stress, right, as one of the main factors in bringing in the EMA. And their own agency, Stats Canada, disproved them months ago, right? So they're just going to get up there and lie with impunity, because why wouldn't they, right? This inquiry has little to no power, right? It's an inquiry. It's not a court proceeding. It's not an investigation. It's an inquiry, so they can bring in more. They're using the EMA easier to bring in my opinion. So that's what I got with that.
And that's
just can I just interject one thing here that was really funny about the War Memorial event? So there's Mendocino saying we attacked it, and the newspapers are saying we desecrated it and all this sort of stuff. I laughed at ourselves while we were doing it, because we're a bunch of ex-military guys, and what do? We take all the fencing down, we put it in one big pile, squared the pile off so it was at 90 degrees and all nicely shaped, took all the hardware from the fencing, put it in the next pile, everything was nicely squared away, and then guys like Jake had the tools there so we could scrape a week's worth of ice, snow, and everything else, and clean the thing up good enough that it would pass an inspection. And then we had a padre from the military come in and run a prayer service on the War Memorial. And I kind of just laugh at ourselves in the sense that, here we are, tearing the fencing down and attacking it, but we put it in nice 90-degree, organized piles, and then had a padre come in. So the distance between what really happened and what got discussed in Parliament by guys like Mendocino is just amazing. Anyway, sorry, I just had to say that. Dave, back to you.
Oh yeah, no, that's I'm glad you brought that up. It's such a good point, because that's what I watched. I'm sitting here, guys, I live in British Columbia, and first of all, just the time that the trucker convoy happened was right around one of the darkest times that we've seen, right? Everybody was feeling so down, so low, and myself as well. And I'm just getting a little bit of feedback. And maybe, Tom, if you don't mind just turning your volume down just a titch on your end. There you go. The feeling that I got was just immense hope. And I watched so many people around me that were like, there were suicides going on like we've never seen before. There were people talking like that around me. It was incredible. And when the truckers lit up, I've never seen anything like it. I've never experienced anything like it. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. And just seeing people, we were talking before the show, Tom, about stuff that you'd never see that we saw, like Albertans and Quebecers hugging and dancing and singing the national anthem together. That's why aren't we having an inquiry about how this was one of the most unifying events we've ever seen? So when I saw that, it was like a light out of the darkness. And I watched all the footage, and I even did live streams, 8-hour live streams covering the events and trying to show people. And then you turn into the news, and it's like they're showing you a movie that doesn't exist. And now here we are with this inquiry. And I think what everybody's wondering, because that feeling of anxiety or whatever you want to call it in Canadians is really high right now, because they're feeling like they're just getting a snow job here where, oh, we're doing an inquiry, but there's not going to be anything coming out of it. So I think some people are just quick to go, there's no value to it. Maybe we could just go around really quickly and what do you think? Like, I feel like the value from a media standpoint is, or an optics standpoint, is that we get the opportunity to get these guys on the stand to lie under oath, document it, and then continue to share out this information to help wake up other Canadians. So I think that's the value. But, you know, I get that point where people are like, they're just going to keep protecting the government officials. Trudeau's probably not even going to show. He's going to hide behind the curtains again, or get COVID, or he's got to go visit Davos or something urgent. And, you know, so people feel like we're not really going to get anything out of this. Do you agree with that? Or do you think there is a lot of value to what we're seeing with the convoy? Let's swing over to Saxxon first there.
It's really mixed for me, because I have noticed that there seem to be two different types of modes of, I guess, for lack of better terms, freedom fighter in Canada. And I think that a lot of people lean heavily on hoping that other things are going to change things for them. But when it comes to the outcomes of the Emergency Measures Act inquiry, I think that largely it's going to provide a lot of cover for the Liberal government, and it seems to be designed that way. Yesterday, we witnessed the government object to bringing in unredacted evidence, so that could be examined and cross-examined appropriately by the convoy organizer lawyers. And so we see things like that happening. The commissioner himself already ruled not to bring in any of the unredacted evidence as well. So it just shows that they're not really interested in getting to the truth. And I feel that it's because it has to happen after the Emergency Measures Act is enacted. You have to have an inquiry. They picked the judge. The judge is connected heavily to the Liberal Party in the past and currently. And what are we going to do? I don't think we're going to really get much other than lies that we can show. And I think that's unfortunate, because a lot of people do deserve to get some type of, I don't want to use the word retribution, but to have some accountability shown on behalf of these governments that have come down hard. I mean, the only evidence of violence that there has been so far has been the videos of Chris and the other lady there, who were beaten by the police and had rifles pointed at them and things along those lines. And they tried to hide that stuff from the public as best they could. So that's all that really you need to see to know what this inquiry is really about, is how they're acting about going along with these things. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to bring anybody to account. And if anything, they're going to use anything they can, which is why they don't correct Mendocino or ask him to substantiate anything he says. They're not going to do anything but make it easy to bring cover for the Liberals, or make them sound like maybe they're kind of stupid and they don't understand things, but that's passable to a degree. So it's a show, unfortunately, and I think that most people need to start really understanding that the best thing we can do is get together in our communities and support each other, because at this point things are, unfortunately, I'm not trying to be a doomer, but things are getting worse, and there's not going to be much to do other than protect yourself and your friends.
Right. Jake, what do you think, brother?
Yeah, I think Sax nailed it there again. But the one thing that I've gotten out of the inquiry was, like, I knew about the Privy Council, but now that I know their names and their faces, that was a bonus for me, because those are the people that have been string pulling for years that most people have never heard of, right? Everybody knows Mendocino, everybody knows Trudeau, right? So that was a positive, I think. Again, I got to agree with the not retribution, but A little bit of validation, I guess, from like, okay, so I wasn't crazy. Like that stuff did happen, and they're putting it on record. But as far as if anybody thinks anybody's losing their job over this, or there's going to be anybody put in jail from the government, I mean, don't get your hopes up on that one for sure. And that's about it for me. Like I agree with Saxxon. Like find friends for sure.
Yeah, it's good points. And Tom, let's get your comments. And I guess maybe the way I'm thinking about it is we have a captured government situation. And in order to weed this sort of Canadian deep state out, for lack of a better term, I think it's actually pretty accurate. It's going to be a step-by-step marathon because Canada has been sadly asleep at the wheel on so many of these issues, but we're slowly getting a crash course. You know a lot of people in Ottawa, you know a lot of people all over the country. Do you feel like more people are starting to wake up to the truth about this? Do you feel like it's getting worse in that front? Do you feel like this inquiry could maybe get things into evidence or into, what do you call it? Setting precedent of some kind that could lead to further court hearings or things, because we got a lot of things going on in BC, for example, where there's a lot of stuff with Bonnie Henry and she's back in court, I think coming up again. There's a lot of different people trying to bring their case for what went down with the mandates. And I'm just wondering if the inquiry in any way would be a positive thing for helping to gather the evidence so that we can pursue further legal action down the road. What do you think about all that?
I think, yeah, well, wow, there are a lot of things there. Okay, so first thing, I think the inquiry itself is part of the larger process of waking people up in Canada. As Saxxon and Jake pointed out, the thing has no teeth. No one's going to jail. No one's going to get fired. People have consistently lied verifiably under oath, and they won't be held accountable in any legal sense of the term. Having said that, the first week of the inquiry was actually kind of interesting in the sense we saw that the thing was a complete clown show. The Ottawa police are blaming the OPP is blaming the RCMP is blaming blah, 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 and on it goes. So let's just go back and kind of remember what happened. The convoy showed up, legally constituted group of citizens to talk to Parliament. Parliament, by the way, comes from the word parler, to speak. They were there to speak to their federal representatives. The chief federal representative is a guy named Prime Minister Trudeau, who physically ran away and had to go into hiding because the big evil trucks with noisy horns or something, I don't know, were scaring him or something. So he ran away. Then you're left with Mayor Watson, who, God bless his soul, is basically incompetent. He's involved in a whole bunch of scandals with, the rail system here is $1 billion over. And guess who's involved? SNC, Lavland, and all that sort of stuff. So poor old Watson, who's out of his depth, is stuck holding this problem. And he dumps it on his chief police slowly, who got himself fired, in my opinion, by stating the truth. When he was asked, why aren't you arresting these people and dragging them off? He goes, it's not a police problem. It's a political problem, and it needs a political solution. And in my opinion, that's what got him fired, was he correctly pointed out that it wasn't a police failure. It was a political failure. In the intelligence branch, we always laugh. There's two things. There's intelligence failures and operational successes. In this case, there's political success and a police failure. So the politicians will say they did everything right, but it's the fault of the police. So I think that was a bit of good fun just to watch the evidence unwind that every one of those groups of people was unprepared, incompetent, but none of them are willing to call out the actual problem and say the problem is the Prime Minister ran away and stayed in hiding basically for 3 weeks. I don't want to get into a whole fifth generation warfare discussion here. We can do that later. But one of the things that's fascinating to me about the commission is it's a great example of fifth generation warfare. Here we watch Minister Mendocino lying on the stand with zero evidence saying, there's this special group of secret military and police guys hanging out at Coventry and, they were going to do stuff and then overthrow the government. He says that while offering zero evidence. The media then reports and says, oh, the minister was worried about those police and military guys who are going to overthrow the government. And the public is told that's really what it was all about. It wasn't really about the convoy and the horn and the diesels. It was about, those secret military and police guys that were going to overthrow the government. So the public now is kind of like, whoa, that must be true. So that is a classic example of watching the cycle go. The minister lies about it. The media reports it without questioning, does the minister have any actual evidence, which of course he doesn't. It's fed to the public believes it, and then the cycle goes around and around again. So in my book, Eyewitness to Deceit, I wrote this thing because to me, the entire campaign by the government of Canada was an info war against the convoy from square one. And it's fascinating to watch the Commission of Inquiry playing its role in this info warfare of allowing guys like Mendocino. We're going to see Omar El-Gaba, who's lied through his teeth repeatedly about the convoy as well. And, they get on the stand, lie without any accountability, and that becomes part of the public record. And there we go. So I'm like Saxxon and Jake. I'm kind of mixed. On the one hand, it's good to see people out there. It's good to see the testimony. It's good to see information getting out onto the public record. On the other hand, no accountability. Nobody's going to get cross-examined later. I can prove that, Mendocino lies through his teeth repeatedly. In my book, Rick Gill and I actually went through each footnote, like the 200 footnotes we put in there. Each footnote is individually assessed for source reliability and information credibility to a level I would walk into court, into a federal court in Canada with my book to testify to every footnote and every statement. So, Mendocino's a liar. The press will not challenge him on these issues. So we're left with, independent media, private media, and small groups to raise the issues and put the truth out there. So again, like Jake and Saxxon, I'm mixed, but, it's a process that's occurring. And I think at the end of the day, more people are going to watch this and they're going to kind of say, wow, what is really going on here, which is a good thing.
Yeah, that's where I guess I sit, just because I do this independent media, that I've gotten so much ammunition out there because of this and because of the work of great people on the ground. And so that's what's helped. And I know personal people in my life that they were trusting the media on a lot of things. And then they either went to Ottawa themselves and came back and went, holy crap, they are totally lying about this. Or I sent them a clip or an interview or something, and they're like, I didn't know this. And now they're thinking about it differently. So in that sense, it's a positive, because we got to wake Canada up. Because even if we get all these guys out and we replace them with moral people that are actually going to work with the Constitution and the real law, if Canada is fast asleep, we could just get more of these guys back in the future, and it would be a constant repeating situation, right? And as you were talking there, Tom, it made me think of that quote from what's his name, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, when he was talking about how tyranny works. And he's like, we know they're lying. They know we know they're lying, yet they still lie. And that's what it's like. And all of the friends that I've had who've been to Venezuela, Romania, Poland, Russia, China, who come out and are like trying to warn Canadians, guys, don't you see they're doing the exact same blueprint here? This is what it is. They would say the same thing. They were like, yeah, that's when you know it's tyranny, is when everybody knows that they're lying and they just keep doing it. And we're watching that happen in front of our eyes. And speaking of lies, let's do that other clip here. This is the second clip that I have. Let's just watch this quickly and we'll come back for more comments.
Minister of Public Safety, the RCMP and CSIS both report to you, is that right?
Yes.
And Minister, you were receiving a range of information about the risks and threats from those agencies that were being posed by the Ottawa occupation?
Yes.
And we understand, we've heard other evidence that there were former military and law enforcement members who were participating in and assisting the convoy. You were hearing that information?
I'd heard those reports, yes.
And I gather that was a concern for public safety, because those types of individuals would have certain skills and expertise that could, present some logistical or greater threats?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. Here, I'm just going to open up the mics and let's just keep it free flow. Who wants to go first with that one? Saxxon, you want to say something? Or
Yeah, so I do find it that's again kind of another he's pushing again the military and ex-police narrative that there's a threat and that the RCMP and so on were concerned about us, which I find really interesting that they were talking about, oh, the RCMP and CSIS were mentioning oh, the threats that the convoy have. Meanwhile, some of us on the ground were seeing what was happening in the news, like let's say at Coots. And a lot of the rumors we were hearing was like, oh, they planted weapons and they're going to come and plant weapons on the convoy trucks and stuff like that. So things that we would do, part of my old job in the military would be like search and looking for weapons and things like that. So we talked amongst ourselves about how do we tell these truckers to keep their eyes out for these types of things and kind of police themselves in a way that's legal and makes sense and that's not confrontational in any ways, because at different points in times, trucks were showing up and joining the convoy and protest at different spots where they were gathering. So the things that we would do would be like, okay, so we'll have the message passed out to these different factions of truckers that exist that, okay, just be aware that if anybody comes and joins your area, that you ask if you could see around their cab and check their trucks and ask them if they're carrying any weapons or anything like that as a deterrent and as a way to find anything that might be getting planted amongst the truckers, and then to report that to the police right away. And it was always the police that were going to handle the things. We would just direct them on how to safely go about making sure and monitoring none of these things were happening to us. So that's about it. And that's for like experience and things that were being put around. There was no ill will towards the police. We wanted to work with them. We wanted to keep them safe, us safe, and we didn't want to have any issues because we understood that the police are often looked down on by the media and society as well. So we didn't necessarily want to go out of our way to get them involved in anything that would look bad either. So part of our whole idea is that we can all walk away looking good from this and protect Canadians. And that's how we kind of were looking at our situation doing security and things like that. Well, the police were walking around openly doing it and they have all the legal authority. So you'd always direct people, you should go speak to the police over there. A woman came over to me and said that she was doing donations and there was a strange group of people that were watching her. And I said, okay, that's excellent. And I took her to the police and said, okay, here's a police officer. Tell her what you told me. And then that's it. So they're acting like there was like this chaotic group down there. We're like, okay, like we're openly working with the police and there's nothing to report about us doing anything extreme at all. And that's the narrative they're trying to walk away with. So that's my counter narrative, the truth of what was going on. We wouldn't do anything other than be like, oh, that's a bad situation to get caught up in. How do we protect ourselves from weapons showing up at the convoy? Like that's it. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's good. And maybe Jake or whoever wants to go. I was just thinking too about this whole discussion that happened yesterday that ended up, I think, getting the convoy lawyer kicked out with that evidence. Did it have to do with whoever it was that was bearing the Nazi flag? That it turns out, I think there's a connection to the Toronto Star or something. I don't want to spread rumors, but this is what I'm hearing. Or at least we know who the person was. And he couldn't even get Medicino to even admit to just a basic understanding of law. And then he had a big argument. He got kicked out. But do you guys have any comments on that? Because the average person that was listening to the media is conflating the truckers with literal Nazis. And yet we just have the one sighting of that flag. And then I remember watching footage people were sending me of when the counter protesters came in, there was like 9 communist flags flying around. And I'm like, how come there's no inquiry into that? And there was actual instances. I remember there was a video where like a 13-year-old girl had some drunk guy came up and just was like grabbing her flag and started a whole thing and started a fight with the dad. And the dad was trying to not do anything. That guy ended up getting arrested. And then, of course, the violence from the police. So we did have violence. We did have extremism, but it didn't come from our side, in my opinion. Jake, what do you think?
I want to know what happened to the trailer load of guns that went missing that week. Everybody remember that?
The one in Toronto. Yeah.
What happened there? Odd timing, I thought. Odd timing.
Yeah.
Anyway, how do you lose a trailer of guns? First of all. Second, anybody that thinks that a communist flag isn't the worst flag on the planet needs to go read a history book. For sure. Right? For sure. But yeah, like, I mean, Saxxon and I only had very few, I think maybe 1 or 2 meetings actually there, but my group of veterans down at the tomb was doing the same thing as far as going around like down the side streets off Wellington, like the perpendicular streets, excuse me, and just doing the same sort of thing, like make sure the guys at each corner kind of had a little guard going, looking for these things, you know, strangers showing up, right? And as far as that goes, like I've had some pretty interesting conversations in the last year of my life. Like I spent, I guess, 3 or 4 months walking halfway across the country with James Top. Met a lot of veterans there, a lot of veterans that were in Ottawa, and some of the things that those guys saw, like you and Saxxon, you and I had a pretty good conversation there in Fredericton, if you recall, right? That wasn't the first or last time I had heard things like that, right? So I was more concerned about the agent provocateurs than anything else, to be honest.
Yeah, and they were there.
Yeah, just one other thought to follow up with that is a lot of people ask, well, what were vets even doing there? Why were you involved? Why did James Top walk across Canada? What were you guys up to? Here's kind of the thing, and I know people don't like to hear this, but vets are not extremists. We're not radicals. We're the opposite of that. We're the opposite of all this stuff. And the reason is we've got a bunch of guys like myself of a certain age who went to places like Bosnia, Croatia, Albania, Belarus. You've got those young whippersnappers there, the young guys like Saxxon and Jake who've been, and a whole bunch of other guys, obviously, who went to a different series of places like Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, whatever. And then we've got guys who Mali and Central America and Golan Heights and the Sinai and Cyprus and you name it. We know what stupid looks like because we've seen stupid up close. When you see a country like Yugoslavia, which wasn't that bad a place, get ripped to pieces by heavy artillery and tanks, you start to understand what the politics of identity are about. When you see the ethnic cleansing, when you see the rape camps, when you see the refugees and all that stuff, you start to understand what politics looks like when it turns into a bare knuckle game. And our government has chosen to send us to multiple conflicts around the world for multiple reasons, typically to try and stop some of this foolishness or put it in check or whatever. And of course, we got guys right now in Eastern Europe who are indirectly part of that whole mess in Ukraine, and we could wind up in something there again. But here's the thing. Most vets are pro-Constitution. We're pro-Bill of Rights. We're pro-Charter of Rights. We know what the criminal code is. We know what it's about. And generally speaking, at least up to the convoy, we're pretty pro-police. And we tried to put the police in a good position during the convoy, most of whom were pretty good. A few of the senior ones, like we've seen, like Brenda Lucky, not so good. But we're very pro-law and order. So the only thing I ever took personally out of this whole convoy was Councillor Diana Deans in Ottawa saying they knew there were terrorists operating in the convoy. And Danny Bullard and I took that personally because I've testified in criminal court against an Al-Qaeda-inspired terrorist plot at some risk to my own life. I've done a whole bunch of counterterrorism work, and Danny Bullard, ex-RCMP guy, ex-sniper guy, Danny is the absolute tip of the pointy end of the tip of the sword in these kinds of things. And we did that video, Danny and I, and he said, look, if we see anybody show up in Ottawa advocating violence, advocating terrorism, advocating the overthrow of the government, we know exactly how to go after them, who to turn them over to specifically, i.e. RCMP and CETNAT. And if there'd been any of that kind of nonsense even begin to surface in the convoy, the vets would be the first people to take it out because we know what those idiots are like. We've seen what they've done in Bosnia, Croatia. We've seen what they've done in Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Mali, you name it. And all of this sort of extremism stuff the government accuses us of is the exact opposite of what we actually stand for. So again, you see this Joseph Goebbels kind of information coming out of the government that they are accusing us exactly what it is they are involved in. The politics of identity, that's the government of Canada. The politics of division, that's the government of Canada. The politics of hate, that's the Heritage Department. Again, another government department. So yeah, we took that part kind of personally, at least I did. And that's the only time. The rest of it, out freezing my butt off in minus 20-degree weather at my somewhat advanced age. That's just a part of being here. I didn't mind that. Having my accounts frozen was kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. But being called a terrorist and violent by a grossly incompetent city council and a grossly incompetent prime minister, that just, yeah, I took that one personal. Anyway, end of rant.
I love your rants. This is great. I was thinking too about if people have a short-term memory, unfortunately, before the pandemic, we had people holding CN Rail hostage and lighting pallets on fire and having armed patrols guarding their protest with full backing of the RCMP, full protection of the RCMP, full protection of the government and the media, right? We had the Summer of Love in the US that spilled out into Canada over George Floyd. That ended up being the most peaceful demonstration that was mostly peaceful that we've ever seen, although it ended up burning multiple states almost to the ground and cities and businesses getting kicked in. And of course, the whole media around the world was at the back of that, including in Canada. And so you really start to think, we had how many churches got burned to the ground? You know, and again, aside from the issues that inspire these things, we have a beautiful example that actually was a shining light to the world about how to do the most peaceful protest possible when you have millions of people around the country. It wasn't even just Ottawa. I was out on legislation here in British Columbia. It was every weekend was just packed. Truckers coming, vets, police, everybody. It was all over the country. So when you have that many people that are able to get together, and there's not even a fist. Well, maybe there's a couple fist fights. I didn't even see footage of it, but there was no violence. Yeah, there probably wasn't even that. And yet here we are for weeks and weeks in minus 40 weather. You have this beautiful thing. And that's the one they demonize. And this is an indication that this is a one-sided situation and the government is corrupt in that way. Did you guys have any comments on that, about the just direct hypocrisy of this being the most freaky, scary thing that ever happened? Yet we had people literally burning buildings to the ground not so long ago.
Yes, it's an ideological campaign that they're waging on a lot of people, and you have to fall in line with their ideology. Things like BLM and the LGBT plus type protests and parades and things like that, they get massive support because it pushes division and it also kind of robs culture and stuff like that in Canada. So they like that. And that's what they want to push when they see something that's united Canadians behind their actual culture, which is the Canadian spirit that was driving all of us there and driving all of us to participate in some type of protest to show the government what we really thought. That's what they want to crush, because the Canadian spirit literally took out the Nazis. It took out the Germans in World War I. Like, don't mess around with the Canadian spirit. And they saw that gathering, and they had to paint that badly. Anything that takes away from that Canadian spirit and causes division, they want to promote, because that's their ideology. Is like a division-based death cult is what we're dealing with here. And that's what we got all the time, is constant ideology. And if you're not in line with their ideology, they take you out. And if you do things that aren't in line with their ideology, they take you out. Look at Jeremy McKenzie right now. That's where we're at in this country. And unfortunately, we're at an ideological war and information war with this government.
Jake, what do you think?
I just want to answer Tom's question about why vets were there. If you want to know why veterans were in Ottawa, you need to go back to Chris Deering's testimony at the inquiry. Right? You want to, that's why veterans were there. Full stop. Right? Like,
that was a bombshell. Yeah.
Oh, no one has an excuse if Chris Deering doesn't have an excuse, as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, that guy's an actual hero, like an actual one, right? Yeah, I agree with Saxxon, Tom, and no surprise, but it's an ideological war, right? Like, and I totally agree with what Saxxon said about the Canadian. Like, that was the true, that's a little bit cliche to say now, but that was the Canadian spirit, as far as I'm concerned. I never went on a tour or saw no combat myself, but I live in the house today that my parents built, on land that's been in my family since 1861. And my grandfather was wounded in the Battle of Ortona in Italy in 1944, right? And I, to this day, walk by his medals, right? His medals for bravery in the field, his campaign stars, right? And they just want to do everything they can to tear that down, right? Look, why do you think that we're allowing non-citizens into the Army at this point, permanent residents, right? Because they've created a culture within the country that the young men of the country, which since time immemorial have filled the ranks of any army, don't have any pride in their country, right? They're taught to hate themselves, hate their ancestors. You're all racist, men are women, women are men, or not, or whatever. You know what I mean? So what? Like, and I don't know, man. Like, not to go on too bad of a rant here, but why would any of them want to sign up for the military? Right.
Right.
Well, you get to wear a pink tutu now. That's pretty exciting. We didn't have that when I joined.
I saw some guys in Truro on the way home the other day, man, that both of you would have shit your pants. Like, I'm talking a literal blue mohawk, right? Blue mohawk, boots not blouse, man. Like, basically kind of a bitty bag was what he looked like, man. I was just like, my head wanted to explode. You know what I mean? Like, you imagine showing up for roll call in the morning to your warrant scene, you're looking like that, like.
Yeah.
So not only have we have 12,000 people we've lost this year, recruited 3. The standards are in the toilet, quite obviously. We just talked to some of my ex-Dragoon buddies. They talked to a guy recently, and they're down. So normally a troop in the Armored Corps is 32 guys. The troops now in the regiment are 16 guys. That's only 4 vehicles per troop in an armor regiment, man. Like, that's half. We're at half.
Wow.
Yeah. Just,
right, and that's Russia.
Yeah. Just to follow up, David, on your comments about terrorism and this sort of stuff and events that were occurring, like the church burnings. Don't forget, there was also an incident in British Columbia where an oil facility was attacked. Multi-million dollars worth of heavy equipment was destroyed in a planned, coordinated attack. And as someone who's extensively on terrorism, someone who's testified in criminal court and federal court on terrorism, I feel perfectly comfortable in saying that attack on that oil facility met the narrow legal definition of a terrorist attack. So those folks who carried out that terrorist attack have faced no repercussions. The RCMP says they're investigating. It's been almost a year now. Nothing's happening. I'll tell you, nothing's going to happen. The attacks on the churches can be considered vandalism in some cases. When you start burning them, is it terrorism? It's a tough discussion to get into without knowing the motivation of the people. But certainly it's over in that direction. So when Trudeau was asked about, well, what about this burning of churches? You know, is this serious? He goes, well, yeah, they're burning churches, but you have to realize it's understandable. In other words, people are angry. So, you know, it's okay to go out and burn stuff down. But yet with the convoy, where we stressed peace, where we cooperated with the police, where we shared our intelligence with. I went around and banged on police car windows and said, here's our intelligence reports. You need to read them. We stuck them on Twitter. We stuck them on Google Drive so everybody could read them. We get called terrorists, and people are hunted down and exposed in public with illegally hacked material saying, oh, you donated $20 to that convoy, so, you know, we're going to ruin your life and we're going to associate you to terrorism. So, yeah, we've got actual terrorists in Canada blowing stuff up for political reasons, and the RCMP and the federal government remain completely passive in the face of this. But if you have a major demonstration in Ottawa that, well, basically embarrasses the government, you get the terrorist label, you get investigated, you get your accounts frozen, you get tossed into jail. And for the record, Tamara Lich is a political prisoner, let's be clear. And also, just while we're on the subject, Jeremy McKenzie and Pat King, you can have your opinion of them. You can like them, you can hate them. Up to you, free speech, whatever they say, there it is. The reality is, neither one of those guys worked for the convoy. Neither one of them had any decision-making role in the convoy. Neither one of them played any role in which truck went where or which can of diesel fuel wound up anywhere. Both of those guys are social media operators. Yeah, they had a big following. Yeah, they had influence that way. But the fact that they've been arrested and harassed and all that stuff, to me, falls into the heading of a political prisoner. Now, I don't think we should go down the road too far today because there's ongoing legal cases and I don't want to get into it and sort of corrupt the process and everything else. Right. But when Danny Bullard wrote the introduction for my book, and he says, and I agree with him, that either one of us as experienced professionals in testifying in court, and Danny as an RCMP officer, would happily walk into a criminal court or a federal court and say, Pat King, Jeremy McKenzie had zero influence on the outcome and the decisions of the convoy. Both of them are big-time social media people. And again, you can choose to like them or dislike them. That's up to you.
Yeah,
End of
exactly.
rant.
The government,
Sorry.
when they come in and they start moving past just, well, it's even bad enough with the censorship. That's something that I've experienced and many other content creators. I've been kicked off every mainstream platform because I covered the pandemic, I covered the elections, I covered a lot of these things that you're not allowed to talk about, even though the most important subjects possible. I started interviewing doctors, I started interviewing professors, that Canadian professors that were coming out in against a lot of these mandates and the justification for it. And you just start to go, well, there was numerous ways the government could have prevented this event. Number one, they could have answered the call for a public discussion with Health Canada, with the 3 doctors that came to that event. But instead, they didn't even show. We had Dr. Byron Bridle, who's like one of the world's most renowned virologists. And here he is warning people to this exact moment about the real science that they're suppressing about these shots that led to the mandates. And so that's why I named my documentary "The Truckers Were Right," because they've turned out to be right. All the science is coming out. We've had admissions all over. And even if these shots were made out of like leprechaun tears or something, you still have a right over your body. We just did the protest, "My Body, My Choice." And all of a sudden that just went out the window with this one thing. So the contradictions are right there. Tom, really quickly, you were mentioning before the show, I don't know how much you want to get into on this, but you were saying there's a comparison here in Canada to what we've seen going on in places like Venezuela. I've had some friends on here to talk about this. And one of the first things they do is start to demonize the majority of the citizenry, the middle class. And then they start the division games. Then they start the censorship process. They start the censorship process maybe at the bottom, and they move up to the intellectual class. They start censoring them. And then it moves from that very quickly to boots on the ground, outright tyranny, and all the other stuff. Did you want to just quickly comment on that, Tom?
Yeah, it's always tough to use analogies to talk about what's going on. Some people call Trudeau, they say he's Hitler, he's Stalin, he's this, he's that, he's whatever. If people want to understand where is Canada going, what does our future look like? I think Venezuela is a great example. Venezuela used to be a great country. They had a bunch of resources. They had an economy. They had industry. People were eating. People used to like to visit Venezuela because it's a great tourist destination. And in 1998, Hugo Chavez took over. Very much a cultural Marxist, very much a socialist in the sort of Trudeau World Economic Forum sense of the term. And he set about, first off, undermining the media. They closed a bunch of media outlets, nationalized a bunch of media outlets, and took them over so they could only broadcast sort of like government-friendly information, which is exactly what we see in Canada. The government literally bought out a good chunk of the media, and now they're trying to reshape internet so they can control who the content creators are. So guys like you, Dave, are under the axe. They disarmed the population by making it illegal to own most firearms. And if anybody noticed yesterday, the government of Canada just came out again and said any center fire semi-automatic with a clip or something is now on the banned list, and any shotgun is on the banned list. So they're working their way down to disarming Canadians completely. They've essentially sort of taken over and controlled much of the political process. And again, this is a conversation for an entire show, but Justin Trudeau is prime minister with 21% of registered voters having voted for him. And even Elections Canada came out and admitted they sort of, lost 200,000 votes during the last election, not quite sure where they went. And that 200,000 votes would have been enough if they were properly distributed to change the outcome of the election, which our media didn't cover at all. Blacklock's media covered it. A few other people covered it, but nobody else did. But what we're seeing also, the same thing, is the government in Venezuela took over the oil industry and crippled it, took over most of the heavy industry, crippled it. And then a whole bunch of the smart people in Venezuela started just leaving the country because they realized there was no future for them economically or socially. So people always say, well, it can't happen here in Canada, and Canada can't do this and can't do that. And it's like, well, guys like me and guys like Saxxon and a whole bunch of other folks have been in places like Bosnia and Croatia and, wherever, where things were actually pretty good. And yet 3, 4, 5 years later, you've got heavy artillery and tanks in the street. So just to close off this rant, I'll say yesterday it came out, or was it this morning? I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It came out today that Justice Minister Lametti, Public Safety Minister Mendocino were discussing whether they should use tanks in the convoy. And I think this was about February 3rd. So this is like early on. And one of them says to the other in a text, well, we got to talk to Anita, i.e. the defense minister, and find out, well, how many tanks do we have? And then the other guy comes back and says, well, how many do you think we'll need? We need to know this. And it's like, oh, one will probably do the trick, but we'll check and find out. So you have a justice minister and a public safety minister willfully having a conversation about talking to the defense minister about how do they get tanks onto the street. This is China. This is Tiananmen Square. This is Egypt in the revolution. This is Venezuela. This is every third world banana republic we've talked about. And as veterans, we're sitting here looking at this going, holy crap, you've got ministers of the crown discussing the idea of putting heavy armor onto the streets. And then, just to make it completely interesting, earlier testimony, RCMP commissioner is talking about taking military personnel, dressing them up like they're RCMP and putting them into the street. Now, fortunately, in defense of the military here, I think a number of folks at the military just kind of went like, whoop, nope, we're not getting involved in this. This is not us. We don't get involved. We'll provide, medical services, or we can do this and do that, but we're not getting involved in the actual street fight. So I think it's good. But having said that, the military is going full woke. They've got struggle sessions now you have to go to and identify yourself as a white racist and a supremacist, and you're the cause of all the problems and all. So our military is sliding towards being a woke military. And I think, again, I'm off on a rant here. Sorry about this, but there's two kinds of military. There's a military that serves the country. It defends borders. It advances foreign policy overseas. It participates in alliances like Canada does with NATO, or you do peacekeeping like we did through the UN or whatever. And then there's a politicized military that serves the party. So just so folks know, in China, the military doesn't address itself to the government. It addresses itself to the head of the Communist Party. That's who controls the military. And what we're seeing in Canada and the United States as well right now, we have this military that is increasingly being bred and shaped to express the idea that they are there to serve the will of the government of the day, which is the exact opposite of what we were taught is we stay out of politics. You're there to defend democracy, not discuss it. But you're there to serve the will of Parliament and the will of the country, not the will of the political party that's in charge that day. So that's another slippery slope we're going down. But again, another discussion for another day. But the good thing is, I think in this case, that actually came out during the commission that our so-called justice minister and so-called chief law enforcement agents wanted to put tanks on the street.
That's like that alone. Like what the hell? Like that's. Do we do another trucker convoy to protest the inquiry? I don't know. No, we don't do it. Okay, Jake, what do you think? Go ahead.
Do not go back to Ottawa with another convoy. Everybody listening, what do you honestly think is going to be the outcome of that? You think the EMA got put in without reason this time? Holy shit! Honestly, you're never going to recreate it. It's never going to happen, right?
Yeah, one-time thing.
And they're waiting for it. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know. It's like Tom nails it as usual. It's just we got for example, right? I was on Wellington Street. I was about a half a block away from the Supreme Court of Canada. That's where we were staying in my buddy's old toy hauler trailer. We had an little oil drip stove in there, and I actually had one of the conservative MP for. I can't remember who it was. He was south or west of Edmonton to the Rockies. That guy stopped into our trailer to talk for about an hour, probably a dozen times, on his way back and forth to work. Right? I had Liberal and Conservative staffers personally help me haul fuel and salt to the War Memorial. You know what I mean? So it's not quite as clear cut, and those lines aren't as clear cut as I don't think everybody wants to think. Right? So I called my MP. My MP is Chris D'Entremont, who's the Deputy Speaker of the House. I think everybody remembers the clip of the lady asked the question about the WEF, which was heard clearly, and then the speaker's like, oh, we can't hear. Well, that's my MP. I called that guy, I don't know, probably every day I was on Wellington Street, right? Hey, group of vets meet for War Memorial every day, 1,300. The outcome of that was my number is to this day blocked on all 3 of his offices.
Wow, what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that I don't deserve representation. That's what that tells me. Right.
That's bullshit, man.
Yeah. Just a comment on Convoy 2.0. I've seen a lot of people, they've come to me. I've had the police and stuff come to me and say, what's going on with Convoy 2.0? And I tell them honestly, I don't know anything about it. I'm not involved in it. Don't ask me any more questions. But to have any kind of substantive demonstration in Ottawa right now that looked, smelled, or felt like a convoy, to my idea, would be a disastrous idea. This town is so full of hate right now. It's so full of anger. It's so full of vengeance that the government of the day, and I mean Trudeau, Mendocino, Lametti, what's her face there, Christy Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, they are just looking for any excuse to take people down in a very hard way. And my advice would be to do something different. Form communities in your neighborhood, approach your local politicians, approach your local MPs, start going after these guys. Big street demonstration in Toronto, go for it. Winnipeg, Vancouver, whatever. Have a demonstration on the Hill in Canada, great. But any sort of a formed thing like a convoy, I think people want to recreate that massive 3-week-long party that was so full of love and caring and parties and reconciliation and all that stuff. People want to recreate that, and I understand why they want to do it, because it was one of the greatest events in Canada. But to try and recreate that right now, I think A, would be very difficult. B, the convoy was itself not really organized. It was a grassroots thing that just came out of the ground. And this is something, I would testify to, and I've told people, the greatest strength of that convoy, that it was grassroots and it was a movement, not an organization. Perhaps the greatest weakness of the convoy was it wasn't an organization, because it was grassroots and it was 100 different people running it. But again, I don't think you can recreate that kind of event and hope to have it come out the same way. And as we've seen, we have a series of ministers in government who are laying down deliberately a series of narratives, a series of lies to set people up so they can destroy them. And that was one thing we were worried about in the convoy, is they continuously provoked violence. In my opinion, I put this in the book and I'll tell you here, I think Jagmeet Singh and Prime Minister Trudeau and a bunch of others were trying to create a political space where violence was acceptable. The attack on Shepherds of Good Hope, which they tried to blame on the convoy, wasn't the convoy. That was your sort of local, shall we politely call them, anarchists. But, they were trying to create a political space where violence was acceptable. Therefore, the government would come in and crush it. And I think they were massively disappointed by the convoy, that as provoked as it was, it never bit back. I think they were really upset with James Topp and his arrival in Ottawa, that there was no violence there except for 4 idiots who had nothing to do with the march. They were provocateurs trying to provoke the police. And it was Veterans for Freedom that formed a line that blocked that violence and stopped it from spreading. So again, Convoy 2.0, I love it. I know what you're talking about. I know folks want to do it, but I'm with Jake on that one. Bad idea. Let's find some other paths. Enjoy it. It was great. It got the ball rolling, but
let's try something else. Yeah. Saxxon, what do you think? Maybe we can start getting some comments on, and that you guys can talk about any other aspect you want, but people are thinking now, well, what's the next step here? How do you see the next step for Canada? I know it's the hardest question to answer, but what do you think, Saxxon?
Well, to kind of put it into like a setting that's more of like we're at battle right now, and understanding that we're currently under attack by our own government and corporations. There's a whole thing going on right now where we're basically being colonized, and it's through an ideology that's pervasive and supplants the national identity that we have, the culture backgrounds that we have that are various and regional throughout Canada, but we've managed to be united. But they're also now using those differences against all of us as well. So the things that we can do in general are to really get a hold of our kids, if you have children, and start to instill a lot of the ideas that you grew up with. Teach them about Canadian history. Teach them about the things they can learn from. So when it happens in the future, they can see it, which I think is what brings a lot of people like us here. We're probably all pretty into history. And when you're into history, you're able to more recognize the things that are occurring for you to be able to kind of deconflict or discern from things and know what's going on. So I think largely, as we used to say, which is cliche, the future is the generations that come after us. That's still very much the truth. And they're targeting those generations extremely hard right now. So any effort that we can do, let's do something that's actually going to have an effect. Going out there and yelling with streets and signs did have an effect. It brought us all together. We know we're not alone, but let's take that forward now and be like, okay, let's go on school boards. Let's do this and that. That's the actions that people need to start taking. Start at the ground, start fighting back. We know that we have the numbers. Let's use these numbers to affect something instead of just waiting for the next big rigmarole to get together. Let's actually be honest with what we need to do. We're at battle right now. There's a lull right now, and we're giving them all the time right now to continue to take ground or hold the ground they have. We need to constantly go on the offensive. So get on the school boards, get on your town councils, form factions and groups of people who think like you to actively go out and vote and do these things. We have power in numbers, but sitting around on the internet typing about how you want to do Convoy 2.0 is a nice, easy thing to do, and it makes you feel like you're being active. We are not like them. We are better than them, and we need to rise above these things, be active, and be creative with how we do things, most of all. And that's exactly what we have to do. We have to actually fight back. We know that we exist. There's numbers. Let's fight back now. And that's how you do it. Not violence, but you take the trenches that the Marxists like to take. So there's a guy named Antonio Gramsci, and he's an Italian Marxist. And he said that the way that they would take their ideology and force it on us so they could ultimately control us would be through taking the trenches of society, which were our bureaucracies, which were our institutions, and infiltrating them with those ideologies and spreading their ideologies from those institutions. That's what they're doing right now. So we need to get into those trenches and bayonet them and get them the fuck out. That's my opinion.
Boom. Couldn't agree more. Jake, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I again agree with Saxxon there. I think you need to learn how to garden. I think you need to get out of the city. I think you need to take your kids out of public school. Sorry, government school. They're not public schools, they're government schools. And I think you need to worry about your physical fitness, right? In all seriousness. Right? Like how can you claim to be free if you can't look after your own basic needs?
Exactly.
Really. Like if you literally have to depend on somebody else for literally everything. I'm talking about the heat that warms your body to the food that fuels it to the water that sustains you. And you're telling me that you're free? I don't think so, man. I really don't. So, and I know, like, especially now, like trying to get out of any sort of home and into some land right now is probably just ridiculous. Like, I truly appreciate how lucky I am to live on a like, you know, family land that's been farmed for, you know, generations, right? For sure. But like the odd chance are going to get you nowhere, for sure. So if I can say anything, you know, find a group of friends that think like you, buy a plot of land, grow your food, raise your kids.
Yeah, we got to take that power back in the way that they did it, basically. Take a chapter out of that book. And I love how you're saying, Saxxon, about starting on the ground level. This is the vision that I've been having lately, is that these guys, there's this, because we know that this isn't just about Canada, is it? This is happening all over the Western world, all over the world. There seems to be a long-term plan that is rolling out to take out individual sovereign nations. And in order to do that, you also have to take out the concept of an individual that has inalienable rights, because that's something that's very unique to Western civilization. They need to destroy that. And so, and then even when it comes to your health, you're not smart enough to know what's good for your health. You know, all those old herbs and, you know, having vitamin C and, you know, just how we deal with colds in the past, we don't want to do that. You have to go to pharma for the solution, and we're going to force you to do it. So like everything they're doing is to take away your freedom. Literally, it's not just your constitution. It's not just the laws. It's the freedom of your mind. And so free people don't wait around to be told what to do. They just do shit, and they do it for themselves, and they get together with other like-minded people. Like you said, they rebuild community. And I'll just say to people out there that maybe we can give people some positive things here. There's so much great things happening on the island here that I can tell you about that shock me because, BC is considered, I was even jokingly commenting on Premier Smith's video that she put out, that fantastic video yesterday from Alberta. And I'm like, we got double champs in the UFC in different weight divisions. Could you also be the Premier of BC? Just as a joke. And someone was like, maybe you guys should stop voting NDP over there. And I'm like, do I look like a guy that votes NDP, bro? There's a lot of us here that understand what's going on, especially in the rural communities. And all over the island, they've got these potluck groups. They've got these little roundtable groups. They have groups of people that are aligning all over the island to go into local mayor's offices and try to get people in council. It's happening across the board. There's great people doing work. And this is happening all over the country. And I think Alberta, as I'm talking about it, could be also a shining example of how a solution can start grassroots and work its way up to even the provincial level. So, Tom, what do you think about what's going on in Alberta? And what do you think about that grassroots solution that we can give people as to where we should go next?
Yeah, I think we're doing this here in Ottawa as well. I see it happening. I'm a part of one of the groups that people just getting together at the community level, going to somebody's farm, somebody's park, somebody's backyard or whatever, forming those communities, sharing ideas, sharing interests. And then, they're starting to talk about, let's teach people some really weird skills like how to garden, how to can vegetables, how to do this sort of stuff. In other words, develop a certain amount of independence, a certain amount of ability to take care of yourself, and to just start moving further away from government rather than close to it, becoming more independent rather than less independent. One of the things I think we need to start talking about more, and from my background, which is, a whole other thing, the greatest single threat we're looking at in the future is coming out of the Bank of Canada right now. It's coming out of the U.S. Federal Reserve, and this is a central bank digital currency. In other words, the central banks in particular, want to dump currency. So no more $20 bill, no more $2 coin, nothing. They want all your currency to be on one of these things, and it will be a central bank controlled digital currency. So they'll talk about the Canadian dollar, and something will cost, $10.50, and you beep beep and you pay for it, and $10.50 disappears out of your account. Here's the problem. Myself and a bunch of other people had their accounts and payment system closed off. Now, as a former central bank employee, and I'll just admit to that, unfortunately, that I was the security and operational risk manager for the central bank for a few years. Turning off my accounts doesn't really bother me all that much because I have alternative means of payment. I keep cash so where it's available so I can recover it if I need it and that sort of stuff. But I'm guessing most Canadians don't. A lot of people were badly hurt by that. But a central bank digital currency, a cryptocurrency controlled by the government, gives the government the ability to turn you off. If they decide they don't like you or what you're doing, or if you're discovered to own a semi-automatic 22 or something like that, they can literally turn your financial life off. You won't have cash, so you won't be able to buy, you won't be able to sell, you won't be able to pay your rent, you won't be able to pay for your phone, you won't be able to buy food, nothing. They can turn you off completely. To destroy your financial independence is to destroy your entire life. And I think that's the reason the government of Canada, and by that I mean Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, who incidentally is on the board of advisors with World Economic Forum, that's why they went so hard on destroying people's money, closing their accounts. She actually wanted to seize the money, not just close the account, but actually seize the money. And you would have to go into the government and apply to get your money back from them. That's where they were at. Now, fortunately, that didn't happen, but that's what Chrystia Freeland was trying to do. When the government controls your financial life, they control you 100% totally. They can destroy you at any particular time. So anybody in the future that says the wrong thing, that upsets the government, you don't pay your parking ticket, they turn your life off. So my advice to people right now at the community level is use cash more frequently. Take money out of the bank, take cash out of the bank, use it to go to, the grocery store to pay for your haircut or whatever. The more cash that's in use, the better it is to try and keep the cash system going. Also, contact your member of parliament, contact your MLA, whatever, and tell them central bank digital currencies suck. We don't want this. A central bank digital currency is a social control mechanism. If you upset the government, they turn your life off. And oh yeah, by the way, every dollar you spend will be traceable. So if I go to Jake and I give him $10 because he helped me fix my bike, and Jake gives $10 to Saxxon because Saxxon bought beer last night, and then Saxxon gives you $10 for buying a new microphone or something, they know where that $10 went. They can track it and turn everybody off. So each penny, each dollar, each, sort of 50 cents will be traceable, trackable. So they'll know who you deal with, who you talk to, where that money went. They'll be able to tax it. And if they don't like the group, destroy the entire group at once. So yeah, that to me, I think if there's a ditch to die in, that's it. That's the final frontier. Once there is a central bank digital currency, it's over. Freedom's gone. Independence is gone. You're completely dependent on the state. And just in case anybody thinks I'm sort of making this all up, or I'm putting it over the top, the Bank of Canada right now has a section of somewhere between 15 and 50 people. It looks like it's actually 50 people working on the central bank digital currency. Our neighbors to the south, the U.S. Fed, the U.S. Federal Reserve, their central bank, is running a test program right now to check all this stuff out with a bunch of industries to see if they can get it working. Who's one of the participants? TD Bank, Toronto Dominion Bank in the United States. Obviously, their American arm, but they are participants in this thing. So the big banks are into it, the central banks are into it, and that one is an absolute showstopper. Once again, sorry, end of rant.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up, Tom. That is incredibly important. Everybody's trying to think about ways around it. I can only echo the same thing. Get local. Remember, what is wealth? Where does wealth come from? Does it come from the money? Does it come from the digital currency? Or does it come from the people? Jake, you got something to say here? Go ahead.
Your wealth is the amount of time you can work for, like be at your own, like not have to work for somebody else, as far as I'm concerned. That's your wealth.
Right. You're producing the value, you're producing the labor, you're producing the production. Think about the farmers. Look, this was going on in the Netherlands. They're worried that they're creating that centralized system and they're now taxing them on their nitrogen and all of this, which is going to completely destroy independent farming. And that's what that was about. We got Brazil up in arms about their election. That's going to be interesting. So what I want
No, they're excited about the World Cup. The CBC said they were excited about the World Cup. Okay,
they're
they definitely don't have the army headquarters surrounded. Okay, that's not what that's. You spread misinformation.
Exactly. Oh my God. But this is all good things, and maybe we can leave people with. I don't want to leave people with hopium, but I want to leave people with hope, because I think without hope, your country's done. Your life is done. You have nothing to lean for. Even though we are in the thick of the fight, and here we are with warriors that know what that's all about. I wasn't in the military, but I've studied the warrior tradition and martial arts my whole life. So I come from that same sort of spirit, I think, where you have to fight back against it, but we need to have hope going into this battle. We can't go into battle thinking we're going to be defeated. Otherwise you've already lost. Even if you will lose, you go in with the mindset, I don't know how I'm going to win, but I know I'm not going to lose. Like, that's kind of where I'm at. So maybe Saxxon, and we'll just go around the room. Do you have anything that could inspire people? Do you have any sort of parting words that could give people some hope in this very dire situation we find ourselves in Canada?
Definitely. So in the military, you come across a lot of different people. Some of them are short, some of them are old, some of them don't look very physically fit and things like that. But you'll be surprised when the pressure comes, like you deploy this person somewhere, how checked out and how able they are to adapt and overcome to the situations that are presented to them. Doesn't matter if you think that you look a certain way or you act a certain way, you're into the right things or you're as knowledgeable in certain things. You can learn anything you need to learn and you can be proficient at it. And for instance, just myself, Like I came into the military and I had to learn how to use explosives. I had to learn how to do all this different stuff I had no idea how to use before. But you apply yourself, you learn how to do it, and then you know how to do something. At the same time, there's people who were coming in, and we actually have to run courses on chainsaw. But there was people.
Oh, Saxxon just froze up. Oh, there he is. Okay.
I don't know
Go
where
ahead. You're
guys
good. You're
lost
back. Go
me at.
ahead.
I think okay, yeah. So people can learn how to do what doesn't matter how scary or how foreign it seems to you, and that's what everybody needs to. We've been sucked away from being able to use these things and to buy into a convenient life, and life is not convenient, and we need to understand that, attack that aspect, and be able to adapt to all changes that are coming by filling our heads with knowledge and using our hands to do things again. And that's all we can really do, is start to rely on ourselves and the people around us. And I guess that's what I would like to say to people, is that you are able to do more than you think, and the time to start acting is now. So start to motivate yourself by learning new skills and things like that. There's all kinds of different things you can do. YouTube itself has tons of things you can learn. So start learning those things. Just go do something, learn it, and you'll be better for it.
I love it. And also that feeling of being productive is really, really good for mental health. If you feel like you're stuck in the mud and there's nothing you can do and it's all hopeless and, oh my God, we're all going to, then it's over. All right. You've already lost. But if you can at least, maybe you can't fix all the big problems that you want to fix, but you can at least start with trying to be productive and seeing progress in developing a skill. It's so powerful just for your mind, just for developing you as a strong person. And we need strong people if we're going to have a free country. So I love that advice. Jake, what do you think, brother?
I think people should look to James Topp, to be honest, and not what he personally did, but the example he set for what anybody can do, right? Like not to belabor Saxon's point, but like that was his whole message in my opinion. I spent a pretty significant amount of time with him. I literally walked in the man's footsteps half the day, every day, and that was about you taking some personal responsibility and affecting change where you can affect change. Like James got that literally historic meeting at the House of Commons because people wrote letters, right? We had a lady at our meet and greet outside of Montreal that used to work for the CBC that told us that one call to the CBC about, complaining or saying they like something, they equate to take as 1,000 people think like that, right? Call every day, write a letter every day, like, and again, I have to go back to this, man. Like, I'm a man that works with my hands every day, and I know the calm that it brings me for sure. And that feeling of, what's the word I'm looking for? Capability, right? Like you feel capable, right? Yeah. Which breeds strength, So I guess look to your personal responsibilities would be my last little ticket.
I love it. That's beautiful. And thanks for bringing up James multiple times. James, if you're listening to this, brother, we love you. We support you. I've had James on the show numerous times. That was absolutely epic. What a legend. You've set an example. And I agree. Follow that example. One man, truth against the world, one against the many. What an amazing example. Those are the ones that won freedom. Hey, Tom, in history, you're a student of history. It's always been the small, the few, the individuals. It was never the masses. Up against insurmountable odds. Even the freedom that we won here in the West was won against all conceivable odds at the time. And yet here we stand. So if we did it then, we can do it again, right?
Yeah, one interesting thing, just to follow on Jake there, he referred to the meeting that James Topp got in Ottawa, and that was actually huge. It should be remembered that the Convoy spent 3 weeks here. It was literally the focus of the world, but the Convoy couldn't get a friggin' meeting with anybody at the federal level. Nobody, nothing. James Topp, on the other hand, was able to sort of take some of that momentum from the convoy, build it across the country. His team organized a letter writing campaign, an email campaign, and everything. And they managed to wind up meeting, I forget what the actual number was, 20 MPs or 22 MPs or whatever it was, 22. Yeah, okay, thanks, Jake. And it kind of, so that went from 0 to 22. So I don't think that those MPs were, you know, full of patriotism and love for country and all this sort of stuff. Maybe they are, I don't know. My sense very much is they were doing this, kind of holding a finger up and saying, wow, we think the winds are changing in this country. So I've got a real mixed view on the future, and, you know, sorry about this, but on the one hand, I'm quite pessimistic in the sense we're moving into a recession. We've got a government headed by, you know, World Economic Forum people like Christy Freeland, who is going to drive us down a path we don't like. But on the other hand, the winds are changing. Positive things are happening. The convoy lit people up. James Top, I think, inspired a huge part of the country to show that 1 or 2 people can make some real differences. And I think this idea of waking people up, forming community groups, and starting to pressure government from the bottom up is actually working. So hard times are coming economically. The recession is going to be bad. There's lots of talk, you know, in financial circles about depression, about sovereign debt crisis and all that kind of stuff. But there is at least, hopefully, maybe a light at the end of the tunnel. And this time it's not going to be a train coming, I don't think. So, yeah, do have some hope. Do prepare yourself for a fight. Do prepare for a struggle. Tough times are coming. But I do believe there is a positive future out there. I think it's coming. And I think more people are waking up to the idea that globalism, cultural Marxism, whatever label you want to stick on this stuff, it's a fancy term for Marxism. It's a fancy term for centralized totalitarian governments. And I think people are getting smart enough to realize that we don't want central control. We don't want totalitarianism. We want independence and freedom. And like I said, it only takes a few people. The U.S. Civil War, or sorry, not Civil War, the U.S. Revolutionary War was started in pubs and coffee houses by people sitting around going, I'm tired of this crap. Let's go do something. So I'm a little pessimistic in the short term, but long term, optimistic. And I think 2022 was the breaking year. 2021, there wasn't a hell of a lot to be positive about. 22, bad year, a lot of strange stuff going on. But you know what? Convoy was good. James Top was good. Rolling Thunder was good. Operation Dignity was good. It showed the country there is a future, there is a hope, and that's good.
I love it. I love it. So good. And also just a note to all that might be listening. If you work in the government, if you work in any of these positions, if you work in healthcare, doctors, physicians, people, if you feel it in your gut that something is wrong, and you might not know the whole thing, but you know something is wrong and you have information to share, this is the time. You're needed. And look, we have these fine gentlemen standing right here who are standing up for what's right at the risk to themselves, and they're not alone. And Canada, don't feel like you're alone either, even though it looks dire here. This is a fight that is being taken to these globalists all over the world. And there's tremendous things happening when you zoom out and you get the big picture. And you can say, wow, we could have been in a really, really, really bad situation, much worse than we are, had there not been any of this resistance that we do see on all of these different fronts. The media has egg on their face all over the world. They're being shown to have been lying this entire time on so many different issues. That means people are moving towards independent media. People are getting off the censorship platforms and moving to censorship-free platforms because they want to have discussion. My job as independent media, I feel, and everybody else should feel this as well, is to keep the conversation going. Because if there's no more conversation, even with the other side, then it leads to physical violence, and that's not going to work out well for anybody. So keep the conversations going in your families and friends circles, even if it's hard. You know, we got Christmas coming up again. You know, keep that spirit alive, and don't ever stop speaking the truth, even if your voice shakes. It's making a difference. It is making a difference. I'm in a unique position where I get emails from people all over the place, and I meet with different groups, and just there are some really, really fantastic things that are happening, even though it is scary as fuck right now. I get it, but keep your cool, learn from these great guys, look at these examples, and start becoming active in a positive, legal, peaceful way, of course, but get active, join this fight for freedom. And I think we can save our country in the long term as well. So I just want to say, gentlemen, It's been an absolute honor to sit here and have this discussion with you. You guys are welcome anytime. Anybody involved with the inquiry, anybody that needs to get some information out, get a hold. I'm going to use this platform to help blast this out. But much respect and love to all of you guys. Keep doing this great work. And thank you so much for joining me for this awesome chat today, gents.
Thank you, man.
Thanks,
And appreciate all the work you do as well. Like, this is an information war and you're definitely in the battle yourself. So thank you.
Oh, my honor. My honor. Jake, you had something there?
Yeah, I just want to make a little plug if I can. A
Sure.
bunch of us from Top's crew, the Canada Marches crew, have started a new venture called Veterans on Wheels. So our goal is to go around and provide some skilled labor to vets that need a hand around their house. Whether it's put in a garden, put up a livestock fence, fix the deck. And on the other side of the thing, help you out with your tax benefits for your VAC, get you set up with a VAC account, haircuts, just like kind of all around emotional support, physical, mental support. Because if I've seen one thing this year, it's we got too many veterans out there that need a hand. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Telegram right now, Veterans on Wheels.
Amazing. Amazing. Tom, where can people find your book? You do a podcast, if I'm not mistaken. What you doing lately?
Not doing the podcast right now. V4F does have a podcast. Look that one up. You can find it on a bunch of different channels. Jeff Evely, V4F. The book is Eyewitness to Deceit, written by myself and Rick Gill. The subtitle of the thing is Prime Minister Trudeau's Infowar on Freedom Convoy 2022. It's self-published on Amazon because publishers, of course, won't touch this kind of subject right now. But God bless Amazon, and I got complaints about that company, but they publish stuff and they don't ask questions, so that much is good. Amazon is actually a free speech company, hard as that is to believe. But yeah, Eyewitness to Deceit, written by myself, Tom Quiggin, and Rick Gill, and it's on Amazon.
Amazing. I'm going to check it out myself. Saxxon, any final plugs there?
I forgot to plug myself. I just started kind of podcasting, and so you can follow me on Telegram. That's only the social media I really use right now. All other social media is just like, I can't stand it. So I'm on Telegram. You can follow me at North of Nothing, t.me/North of Nothing, capital letters for all the starts of the words, if that helps. And you can follow me on there. I'm usually ranting about something or misspelling words. So it's a good time.
Good for you, man. Going to the podcast world. If you need any help, you let me know. I've made every mistake you can make, and I probably got more, but I can help in any way possible. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it. Let's get back to it. I'm going to go find out what's going on with this inquiry, see what lies they're spinning. But let's do this again sometime. And I just want to thank you again. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you found value, which you should, please share this out far and wide. Download it. Make clips of it. Make these things go viral. Let's get the truth out there, because truth is going to win in the end. Watch it happen. All right. Thanks, everybody. Love you lots. We'll talk to you soon. Cheers, everybody.